The war in Iran has led to an unusual standoff between two of the most influential Americans, U.S. President Donald Trump and Pope Leo XIV. The two have been engaged in a very public spat that culminated today when the Pope said that he does not fear Donald Trump. In a moment, I'll speak with a Vatican correspondent about this not-so-divine dispute. But first, here's a look at how it began. Here's Pope Leo last weekend delivering a sermon at St. Peter's Basilica.
Enough of the idolatry of self and money. Enough of the display of power. Enough of war. True strength is shown in serving life. May the madness of war cease and the earth be cared for and cultivated by those who still know how to create, safeguard, and love life.
Well, that did not sit very well with U.S. President Trump. On his Truth Social platform, he posted, "Pope Leo is weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy." And then he said this.
We don't like a pope that's going to say that it's okay to have a nuclear weapon. We don't want a pope that says crime is okay in our cities. I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. He's a very liberal person, and he's a man that doesn't believe in stopping crime. He's a man that doesn't think that we should be toying with a country that wants a nuclear weapon so they can blow up the world. I'm not a fan of Pope Leo.
Well, Pope Leo responded today aboard a plane on his way to Algeria. The audio quality is poor, so we have added subtitles. Take a look.
I have no fear of neither the Trump administration nor speaking out loudly about the message of the gospel. And that's what I believe. And I am called to know what the church is called to do. We're not politicians. We're not looking to make foreign policy, as he calls it, with the same perspective that he might understand it. But I do believe that the message of the gospel, blessed are the peacemakers, is a message that the world needs to hear tonight. So thank you very much for playing.
All right, I want to pull in now Colleen Dull. She's Vatican correspondent at America Magazine. Colleen, it's good to have you with us. Have you ever witnessed anything like this? A president and a sitting pope criticizing each other so openly through the media?
No, certainly not. I mean, I think you'd have to look back to, much further than recent history to see examples of a pope and a world leader kind of going at it like this. Now, I will say I don't know that Leo is really going at the Pope. It's going at Trump the way that Trump came for the Pope on Truth Social on Sunday night. This was him responding, and in all of his responses, he's tried to draw attention back to the message of the gospel, which he sees as his primary message.
The fact that both of these men are Americans, how much of a factor is it in this dispute, would you say?
I think it's a major factor because with previous popes, even with Francis, and Leo has said this himself, Americans could look at Francis and say, he doesn't really understand us. He comes from a different culture, speaks a different language. Francis's English was not great. Whereas when Leo speaks, no one can make that accusation that he doesn't understand what's going on in the country. We know that Leo follows the news very closely. We know that he was active on social media, even tweeting things that were critical of the Trump administration. So, there's been a remarkable consistency here. And I think what's new, perhaps, is that the Pope is now able to speak the language of the American people in an accent that is their own, and that really resonates with people in a different way than perhaps Francis's critiques of the United States, which seemed a little bit more distant.
Yeah, I mean, so with linguistic hurdles out of the way now, let's briefly fact check President Trump here. Is the Pope actually saying that it's okay for Iran to have nuclear weapons, as Trump claims?
No, he has not said that. In fact, Leo is on record saying exactly what Francis said, which is that no country should have nuclear weapons, and that would include the United States as well.
Leo has been critical of the Iran war since it started, but his language has clearly sharpened in recent days. What has shifted, do you think?
I actually don't know that his language has necessarily sharpened. I think that as the war has escalated, he has become more and more pointed. But he said, for example, at the beginning of this war, he was kind of shoehorning the message of peace into as many talks as he could get it into. And then as he's been asked more and more directly about Trump, that's when he's gotten more direct about, addressing the president by name, for example, which is unusual for a pope to do. The Vatican generally has a protocol against naming world leaders or naming countries. So, yeah, I don't know that it's sharpened, but certainly I will say that, like, over the course of this war and even over the course of his papacy thus far, we've seen Leo become much more comfortable in his public voice, which is something that he expressed hesitation about when he first became pope. He said there was a big learning curve for him last summer in becoming a world leader. And now he's certainly gotten much more comfortable with that, even speaking off the cuff about issues like this.
And then, of course, there are President Trump's social media posts, some would say stunts. I want to bring up the AI image that Trump posted today and then later deleted. It shows himself as a Jesus Christ-like figure. Let's take a good look at that and then listen to what Donald Trump said when he was asked about it earlier today.
I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor and had to do with Red Cross as a Red Cross worker there, which we support. And only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, how did they come up with that? It's supposed to be me as a doctor making people better, and I do make people better. I make people a lot better.
All right, Colleen, what do you make of the AI image and the president's explanation of thinking that he was being portrayed as a doctor?
Well, I'll start with the explanation. I don't find it compelling. I mean, how many doctors do you know are healing people with their magic glowing hands or wearing Renaissance-style robes? So I don't find that a very convincing explanation for what was going on in the image. But the stunt itself, the AI image itself, is actually similar to one that we saw at the beginning of the conclave back last May when President Trump posted an AI-generated image of himself as the Pope wearing a mitre and a white cassock, and in fact said when he was asked by reporters that he would like to become Pope himself. I think the thing that both of these show is that Trump really desires to be the center of attention. I think that's even more the case than him having specific issues with things that the Pope is saying or with any of the, many things he mentioned in that very long Truth Social post, is that, yeah, he cannot stand the fact that the world's attention has shifted to something else or someone else, and he feels the need to wrench it back kind of through whatever means necessary.
I can imagine what my late grandmother, what she would have said if she were here and she had seen that post of Trump looking very much like Jesus. I'm wondering, how are Catholics in the United States, how are they reacting to posts like this?
There's been pretty widespread criticism of this, even from the Catholics who have been more aligned with Donald Trump. We've seen a lot of criticism of it, and I think that seeing criticism even by his allies is what has made Trump ultimately take the post down.
We hear about the fractures now in the MAGA world. I'm wondering, how important is the support of Christians in the United States to President Trump?
Oh, I think it's extremely important if you look at, the polling numbers and how they break down. I will say that, Christians are divided in the U.S. on their views of Catholics. I live in the Deep South, for example, and, Christians sometimes don't see Catholics as fellow Christians. And so their views on the Pope might differ. When it comes to Catholics in the U.S., it's interesting that, the idea of a Catholic vote is kind of a misnomer. When you look at the data, basically, Catholics in the U.S. are most likely to vote according to their race, gender, social, economic status, level of education, geography, than they are as a religious bloc, right? It's to the extent that religion enters into the conversation, it's often just kind of used to affirm things that they already would otherwise believe, which is a sad reality, but a reality.
Yeah. And I'm sure that Pope Leo, obviously he has to know, being an American himself, that what he says in this current political environment, what he says is going to be taken and used politically no matter which side of the divide you're on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we know that he's a man who has followed political stories closely for a long time. We know, in fact, that he was instrumental in the drafting of that letter that came from Pope Francis to the U.S. bishops last spring, just before Francis's death, denouncing J.D. Vance's interpretation of St. Augustine's Order of Loves, which he used to justify the cutting of U.S. aid, I believe. So certainly, Leo knows what he's dealing with. And as his recent biographer, Chris Lamb, has written, he's a lion, Leo, who knows when to roar.
All right. Vatican correspondent Colleen Dull. Colleen, excellent talking with you. Great getting your input and your insights on what is happening. As we said, a not so divine dispute between these two important Americans. Thank you.